The locked classroom. Everyone at Westwood High used to look forward to the last day of school. It was freedom, a kind of liberation. The final bell meant the summer stretched wide open, with nothing but heat, laughter, and the promise of nights when nobody worried about homework. But for me, that final day of junior year, June of 2009, never felt like the kind of freedom people celebrate. It felt like a warning. I can still remember the exact atmosphere. Classrooms were noisy with kids tossing papers into the air, lockers slammed for the last time, and teachers forced tired smiles while pretending to hold control over chaos. You'd think nothing could ruin the energy of that day, but there was something about Room 205 that unsettled everyone. Room 205 was the only classroom on the top floor that no one wanted to be assigned to. It was the old science room, converted into a storage space after Mr. Howell, a teacher nobody really liked, had a breakdown 2 years earlier. Rumors said he locked a student inside as a punishment for ditching class. Others whispered that something far worse happened, that the boy never came back out the same way. The door was supposed to be locked now, the windows blacked out with paper. But that year, on the last day, somebody propped the door open. I remember seeing it when I was heading down the hall to return a library book. The rest of the floor was nearly empty. Everyone had already bolted for summer. But Room 205, it wasn't silent. There was the sound of someone shuffling inside. I stopped, my hand halfway clutching my backpack strap, and looked in. The room smelled of dust, chalk, and something sour, like what rags left too long in the dark. At first, I thought it was a janitor, but the figure I saw didn't move like one. It was hunched, long-limbed, pacing the far wall. The sound of nails scratching across the cabinets made my skin crawl. I was about to leave when I heard it. A voice. Small. Choked. A student's voice. "Help me." I froze. It was faint, almost too faint to be real, but I swear I heard it, coming from the back corner where the old supply closet was. Against every bit of common sense, I stepped inside. My sneakers squeaked on the tile, and the pacing figure stopped moving. Slowly, its head turned. It wasn't a janitor. It wasn't even an adult. It looked like a boy, maybe 14, pale as paper, his clothes tattered and decades out of style. His eyes weren't right. They were too dark, too hollow, as if the sockets themselves were bottomless pits. His lips parted like he was trying to speak, but no sound came out. Then, clearer this time, I heard the voice again. "Please, get me out." It came from the supply closet. My whole body was shaking, but I moved toward the closet door anyway. Something inside me kept whispering, "Don't open it, don't open it," but my hand was already on the handle. The boy just stood there, watching. When I pulled, the door screeched open. There was nothing inside, nothing but a faint smell of mildew and a bundle of old, torn notebooks stacked against the wall. I picked one up. On the cover, in thick black marker, were the words, "Let me out." The second I touched it, the room went ice cold. The boy, no longer still, rushed forward, and the only thing I remember is his face filling my vision, mouth wide open, black void spilling out like smoke. I dropped the notebook, stumbled, and sprinted out of Room 205 as fast as I've ever run in my life. When I glanced back, the door had slammed shut. I never told anyone at the time. How do you explain something like that without sounding insane? But a week later, I went back to school to pick up some paperwork. The secretary handed me my schedule for the next year. Guess which room I was assigned to for homeroom? Room 205. I begged to be switched. I cried in the counselor's office until they moved me to another wing. She told me something then, something that's haunted me ever since. "You know," she said carefully, "you're not the first student to request that change. Every single year, at least one kid begs us not to put them in that room. And when we ask why, they all say the same thing." I asked her what they said. She leaned in. They heard someone calling for help. I don't know who that boy was. Maybe a student from decades earlier, maybe the shadow of what Mr. Howell did, or maybe something older than all of us. But every time the school year ends, I think about him, and I know the last day of school isn't freedom for everyone. For some, it's just another year being locked inside. The Yibik smile. The last day of 8th grade should have been one of the happiest days of my life. Everyone was buzzing, signing Yibiks, swapping numbers, and planning summer sleepovers. You know the vibe, kids running through the hallways like they'd just been released from a cage. But when I think about that day, I don't remember the laughter or the music playing from the cafeteria speakers. I only remember the photograph. The yearbook came out that morning, fresh from printers. I flipped through mine, smiling at the cheesy club pictures, the crooked grins of classmates caught mid-laugh, the blurry shots from basketball games. Then I turned to the section of individual student portraits. That's when I noticed something wrong. There, on page 37, was my picture. Same striped shirt I'd worn on picture day, same reluctant half-smile. But behind me, just over my shoulder, was a face. Not the background curtain. Not a classmate photobombing. A face. It wasn't like anyone I recognized. The skin was gray, cracked, almost blistered. The eyes, they weren't looking at the camera. They were locked on me. I thought maybe it was a printing error, some kind of smudge, so I leaned closer. But the more I stared, the clearer it became. The face wasn't distorted by ink. It was there, detailed, real. I slammed the book shut, my hands shaking. At first, I didn't say anything. Maybe nobody else noticed. But then, during lunch, a girl at my table, Marissa, flipped through her own copy. Suddenly, her fork clattered to the tray. "Oh my God," she whispered, staring at me. "What?" I asked. She slowly turned the book toward me. Same page, same picture, same face. Others started to crowd around. They saw it too. Some kids laughed nervously, saying it was Photoshop or a prank. But who would bother to do that? And why only me? I wanted to tear the whole thing apart, but instead I shoved it into my backpack and tried to pretend it didn't matter. But that night, it got worse. I was sitting at my desk, flipping absent-mindedly through the yearbook again, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. I turned to page 37. The face was closer. It wasn't behind me anymore. It was beside me. Its chin almost touched my shoulder, its cracked lips curling in something that looked like a smile. I dropped the book on the floor and backed away so fast my chair nearly tipped over. My heart hammered in my chest, but I forced myself to check again. The photo was normal. The face was back in the background, just like before. I told myself I was tired. I told myself it was nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At 2:13 a.m., I woke up to the sound of paper shuffling. I sat up in bed, my room dim from the streetlight outside. The yearbook was lying open on my desk. I hadn't left it that way. With trembling hands, I walked over. It was open to page 37. The face wasn't there anymore. Neither was mine. The photo space was blank, a gray void where both of us should have been. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I rushed to school with a book in my bag. I needed answers. When I got there, I found Marissa, pale and shaken, clutching her own copy. She didn't need to explain. I already knew. Her photo was different now, too. The face was there, looming over her shoulder, grinning wider. We weren't the only ones. By the end of the week, at least a dozen kids said their photos had changed. Some only had the face faintly visible. Others swore the thing had already replaced them, just like it did to me. And then, kids started disappearing. First was Jordan, the boy 2 rows behind me in math. His parents reported him missing 3 days into summer break. Then Alyssa. Then Tim. One by one, kids who complained about their photos vanished. Police called it runaways. The town whispered about kidnappings. But those of us who had seen the yearbook knew better. The face was collecting us. I burned my copy in the backyard on the 4th of July. The flames curled the pages, ink bleeding and blistering until nothing was left but ash. For a while, I thought I'd escaped. But last month, when I was packing up old boxes from high school, I found it again. The yearbook, not scorched, not torn, perfectly intact. I couldn't stop myself. I opened to page 37. The face was there. And this time, it wasn't smiling. It was waiting. The empty bus. The last day of school is supposed to feel light, easy, like nothing bad could possibly happen. And for most kids at Lincoln Middle, it was exactly that. But for me, June of 2014 was different. The final bell rang, kids cheered, and I remember racing down the hall to the buses, clutching my backpack stuffed with doodles, crumpled worksheets, and an old yearbook signed by classmates I'd probably never see again. I should have been happy. I should have been excited for summer. But the bus ride home that day is something I'll never forget. The wrong ride. I was late getting out, one of the last kids to leave the building. By the time I reached the parking lot, most of the buses had already pulled away. My bus, Bus 12, was still idling at the edge of the lot, door open, yellow paint reflecting the late afternoon sun. The weird thing, the windows were empty. Normally, it was loud and rowdy inside, kids shouting and throwing paper bowls. But this time, nothing. I climbed the steps, expecting the driver to scold me for being late. But when I looked up, my stomach dropped. The driver wasn't anyone I recognized. He was older, with skin like crease leather and a faded cap pulled low over his face. He didn't say anything, just nodded toward the seats. Is this bus 12? I asked. His mouth twitched like he was trying to smile. Yeah, get in. Something about his voice was wrong. Flat, almost hollow. But I told myself maybe they just had a substitute driver. So I stepped inside. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of gasoline and something else, something metallic, like blood on a penny. Every seat was empty. I don't mean empty as in no kids. I mean empty as in stripped. No gum stuck to the backs, no scratches on the windows, no backpacks left behind. It was spotless, like no one had ever sat there before. I slid into a seat near the middle, hugging my backpack. The driver shut the door with a hiss and pulled out of the lot. The road that shouldn't exist. At first, I thought maybe I'd overreacted. The bus bounced along familiar streets, passing the playground, the gas station, the rouse shops we always pass on the way home. But then, about 10 minutes in, I realized something was wrong. We weren't going the usual way. The houses thinned out. The road narrowed. Trees loomed on both sides, their branches twisting together overhead like fingers blocking out the sun. I stood up. Sir, I think you're going the wrong way. No answer. I repeated myself, louder this time. This isn't the route. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Veins bulged, white-knuckled. Sit down, he said, not angry, just final. I sat today. My heart pounded. I pulled out my phone, thinking I could call my mom. No service. The screen just glowed, searching endlessly for a signal. Outside the window, the trees looked strange. Their bark was blackened, peeling, and their branches seemed to bend toward the buses we passed, like they were reaching. That's when I noticed something carved into one of the trunks. It was a name, my name, the passengers. I don't remember how long we drove. Time felt wrong, stretched. The sky outside dimmed, though it was barely past 3. Then, without warning, the bus slowed. The brakes squealed, and the driver pulled onto the side of the dirt road. The door creaked open. No one got on. But the seats around me weren't empty anymore. Kids filled them. Dozens of them. Silent. Still. Their clothes were outdated. Faded bell-bottoms, torn Letterman jackets, dresses that looked decades old. Their skin was gray, eyes hollow, faces slack as if they'd forgotten how to move. I recognized some of them. Faces I'd seen in the in memoriam section of old yearbooks. Kids who had died years before, car accidents, drownings, overdoses. Kids who never made it to graduation. One by one, their heads turned toward me. Not fast, not jerky, slow, deliberate. Their mouths opened, but no sound came out. Only the hiss of air, like a collective exhale. I clutched my backpack, pressing into the seat, shaking my head. No, 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 no. The driver looked at me through the mirror. His lips curved into that almost smile again. This is the last stop, he said softly. The escape. I don't know where the courage came from. Maybe pure terror gave me the strength. But as the bus idled, I bolted. I sprinted down the aisle, nearly tripping over the outstretched legs of one of the dead kids. Their heads swiveled to follow me, necks creaking like old wood. I shoved past the driver, leapt down the steps, and hit the dirt road running. Behind me, the hiss of the bus door closed. The engine rumbled. When I looked back, it wasn't a bus anymore. It was just gone. The dirt road stretched empty behind me. I ran until my legs gave out, until I collapsed at the edge of town, right near the gas station we always pass on the real route home. Someone found me there hours later, sobbing, covered in date, insisting I'd been on a bus that didn't exist. The aftermath. My parents didn't believe me. The school said Bus 12 had left on time, with its regular driver, full of kids. They claimed I must have missed it and walked home. But here's the thing. I wasn't the only one. Years later, at a high school reunion, I overheard someone mention the wrong bus. Their story matched mine almost exactly, down to the silent passengers, the driver's hollow voice, and the road that led nowhere. And every time I drive past Lincoln Middle now, when the buses line up on that last day of school, I swear one of them is always idling a little too far from the rest. Empty, waiting. And if you're ever the last one out of school, don't be so sure the bus you're getting on is really yours. Because some rides don't bring you home. The final locker, the last day of senior year, is supposed to be unforgettable. Everyone cries, takes pictures, and hugs goodbye like it's the end of the world. For me, May of 2017 was unforgettable too, just for all the wrong reasons. It started with a locker. The locker nobody used. Our school had this superstition about locker 318. It was wedged at the very end of the senior hall, right beneath a flickering light that no janitor ever seemed to fix. Nobody wanted it, so every year it stayed empty. Some said a student once died inside, that he slammed the door on himself during a day and suffocated before anyone found him. Others said it was cursed, that if you used it, you wouldn't live to see graduation. Most of us just laughed it off. But on the last day of school, when students were clearing out their things, I noticed something weird. The lock on 318 had been cut off. The door was slightly open, and inside there was a backpack. Not a dusty old relic, but a modern one, black, scuffed, with keychains dangling from the zipper. Fresh. Someone had been using it. What was inside? Curiosity one. I pulled the backpack out and unzipped it. Inside were notebooks. Not normal ones. These were filled, cover to cover, with writing. The same phrase scribbled again and again in frantic, slanted handwriting. Don't forget me. Every page. Hundreds of times. Some words had been pressed so hard into the paper that they tore through. My hand shook as I flipped to the last page, and that's when I saw it. My name. Not once. Not in a sentence. Just my name, written over and over until the ink smeared and bled through. My stomach dropped. I slammed the backpack shut, shoved it back inside the locker, and told myself to leave it alone. But when I tried to close the door, it wouldn't shut. Something blocked it. I pulled the bag out again. This time, at the bottom, there was a small Polaroid photo tucked between the notebooks. It was of me, taken that day, wearing the exact clothes I had on, standing by my locker down the hall. My blood went cold. I hadn't posed for it. Nobody had taken my picture. But there it was, proof. The knock. I dropped everything and ran. Tried to lose myself in the crowd of seniors hugging, laughing, saying their last goodbyes. I told myself it was a prank. Someone messing with me, trying to scare me before graduation. But when the final bell rang and the building emptied out, I realized I'd made a mistake. I was one of the last students left in the hall. And the locker door to 318 was wide open again. Slowly, from inside, came the sound of knocking. 3 slow bangs, like someone fist-hitting metal from within. Then a voice, muffled, desperate. Don't forget me. My chest tightened. The hall felt suddenly colder, the fluorescent lights humming louder overhead. I backed away. The knocking grew louder, more frantic, like whoever, or whatever, was inside was slamming both fists now. Don't forget me. Graduation day. I barely slept that night. At graduation practice the next morning, I kept glancing around, half expecting to see someone watching me from the crowd. When the ceremony finally came, I sat in my cap and gown, sweating under the stage lights. One by one, names were called. Students cheered, parents clapped. But when they called my name, something went wrong. At first, it sounded normal. Then, as the principal repeated it into the microphone, his voice distorted, stretched, like an old recording tape warping. He didn't call my first name. He called the name of the student who had supposedly died in locker 318 decades ago. The audience clapped anyway, like they didn't notice. When I walked across the stage, my legs felt numb, like I wasn't really there. The principal handed me a diploma with trembling hands. For a second, I swear I saw the cover read, "Don't forget me." Then, just like that, it looked normal again. The photograph. After the ceremony, everyone crowded outside for pictures. Parents snapped photos, groups of friends posed together, and the air buzzed with relief and celebration. My mom called me over for a family picture. She aimed the camera, told me to smile. When she checked the shot, her face went pale. "What's wrong?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just shoved the camera into my hands. The photo showed me standing there in my cap and gown, but someone else was beside me, a boy in an old, tattered senior uniform. His face gray, hollow, eyes wide with desperation. His mouth stretched open in a silent scream. His hand gripped my shoulder, and scrawled faintly across the bottom of the photo, like a caption, were the words, "Don't forget me." The end, that isn't. I never saw the backpack again. Never touched locker 318. I moved out of that town, went to college, tried to convince myself it was all in my head. But every year, on the anniversary of graduation, I get something in the mail. No return address. Always the same thing. A Polaroid. Me. Older now. In whatever clothes I happened to wear that day. And standing just behind me, always behind me, is the same boy from the photo. His smile getting wider. His eyes darker. And on the back of every photo, scrawled in messy black ink, just 3 words. "Don't forget me."